Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue with our lessons in the aqaid of Imam Nasafi. And we pray that Allah make this lesson any reason where our sins and are forgiven, our prayers are answered. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open for us any doors of understanding and bless us any goodness in dunya and akhirah. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah, before we continue our lesson for today, just to a bit a recap of what we mentioned in our last lesson. So basically we have completed the introduction of the aqaid of al-Imam Nasafi by al-Imam Taftazani. And this is the last thing that we mentioned in our last lesson. So inshallah ta'ala, today we will enter into the text of Aqaid Nasafiyah. That's what you see here on the screen. The last thing that is mentioned by Al-Imam Taftazani, he spoke about the reason why Al-Imam Nasafi begins Aqaid Nasafiyah by speaking about the muhdasat, yani the universe and also the created beings around us. It's what we will see later. And the reason he mentioned this, he said before then, and this is just a recap. That's what we mentioned. And he says ثم لما كان مبنى علم الكلام على الاستدلال بوجود المحدثات, يعني because the muhdasat, the existence of the created beings in the real world, and it is an evidence on the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator. This is what he said, ala wujudi sani'i wa tawhidihi wa sifatihi wa af'alihi summa minha ila sa'ir sam'iyat. So he begins by speaking about substances and created beings, because by understanding the reality of such things, we will understand about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise we will be able to appreciate the meaning of his attributes, and also we can see the effects of his actions. And then after that he will enter into as-sam'iyat, yani basically the things of the unseen. So because of that, he said that nasaba tasdiqul kitabi bitanbihi ala wujudi ma yushahadu min al-a'yani wal a'rad. So that is why he begins the aqaid by speaking about what is witnessed or what is seen from substances and their attributes. Wa tahaqqul ilmi bihima liyatawassala bidhalika ila ma'rifati ma huwa al-maqsudul aham. So that we are able to understand the things around us, then it will be a stepping stone to understand about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is basically the last thing that Imam Taftazani mentioned in the Muqaddimah. So now we enter into the words of Al-Imam An-Nasafi. So our previous lessons everything we are just speaking about the foundations of this knowledge. We spoke about the definitions of Ilmul Kalam, and we spoke about some of the things that is mentioned by Al-Imam Taftazani in the Muqaddimah, when he spoke a bit about the history, how this knowledge is being established. He spoke about Al-Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari and the debate of Al-Imam Abul Hasan with his teacher Al-Jubai. And then we have come to this stage where we will begin inshallah ta'ala with the aqaid of An-Nasafiyah. And today inshallah I will continue to read and to explain the commentary by Al-Imam Taftazani, because again there are certain things that is mentioned by the commenter, that is Imam Taftazani, due to its high importance. Inshallah we have to return back to the sharh. Although I mentioned that we want to concentrate on the matan, and part of concentration on the matan is also to focus on certain things that is mentioned on the sharh. So he said qala ahlul haqq. So those who have this book with you, just because we are just begin into the text of Aqaid Nasafiyah. So basically what the translator does, he put this in bracket. So if you see words in bracket, these are the words of al-Imam al-Nasafi. And below is the commentary. So you see here, qala ahlul haqq. This is the words of al-Imam al-Nasafi. And then below you see wa huwa al-hukm al-mutabiq lil-waaqi'. This is the words of al-Imam Taftazani. So this is how we differentiate between the text of Aqaid Nasafiyah and the commentary of Aqaid and Nasafiyah. طيب, al-Imam al-Nasafi, he begins by saying qala ahlul haqq. Yani ahlul haqq, and he said, who are the ahlul haqq? What is meant by ahlul haqq and here is ahlul sunnati wal jama'ah. Ahlul sunnati wal jama'ah are the people of truth. So the translation of ahlul haqq basically it means that people who have the conviction towards the truth, and people who are the possessors of the truth. They are the people who are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are the ahlul sunnati wal jama'ah, who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught, and the companions and those who came before them till this day. So these are the ahlul sunnati wal jama'ah, and they are mainly the Ash'ariyah and Maturidiyah. Now we are going to speak about the meaning of al-haqq. This is where you find al-Imam Taftazani, mashallah, he mentioned quite a lengthy explanation on the meaning of al-haqq. So he said, and qala ahlul haqq, the people of haqq, and the meaning of al-haqq wa huwa al-hukm al-mutabiq lil-waaqi'. We find for example, the Western philosophers, they have a lot of debates for many years, from last time until today, about the definition of the truth. So they differ with one another on what are the ways for us to establish the truth, and how do we know that a particular thing is the truth or not the truth. So we find there are a lot of debates in this issue, and we find the scholars of Kalam address this issue and speaks about the definition of the truth and what is the truth. So this is where Imam Taftazani, when he mentioned wa huwa dhamir, goes back to the meaning, to the word al-haq, the truth. So the meaning of al-haq, he said wa huwa al-hukm al-mutabiq lil-waaqi'. This is basically the simple definition of the word truth. Wa huwa al-hukm al-mutabiq lil-waaqi'. Yani it is something that corresponds to reality. Yani it is something that corresponds to reality. So we have the word al-hukm al-mutabiq. Yani the meaning of al-mutabiq, yani it is correspondence. Correspondence towards the reality. So let me give you an example. So for example, if I say this is a cup, I say this is a cup. It corresponds to the reality. It corresponds to the reality. It corresponds to the real world. So in some people use the term real world. It corresponds to what is witness. What is witness in reality. So my saying this cup, this is a cup, it corresponds to the reality. So when it corresponds to reality, this is what you say al-mutabiqu lil-waaqi'. When it corresponds to the reality, now this is a true proposition or a true statement. When we learn in mantiq, for example, we say that a statement can be true or false. Correct or not? How do we ascertain that the statement or proposition is true? So we have to look at this theory of correspondence. Whether it corresponds to the reality or it does not correspond to the reality. If we say that it doesn't correspond to the reality, what does it mean? For example, if I say this is a pen, this is a pen. So we know in reality this is not a pen, this is a cup. So it does not correspond to the reality. So when it does not correspond to the reality, this is baatil. This is basically what Imam Taftazani is going to say. So in order for us to ascertain whether it is a truth or false, we have to look whether it corresponds to the reality or it does not correspond to the reality. So the first thing that basically he mentioned. وهو الحكم المطابق للواقع يطلق على الأقوال والعقائد والأديان والمذاهب. So this principle can be applied to all the sciences. And whether we are speaking about speeches, Yani I make a claim, and for example, or I make an accusation, whether it is true or false. Likewise, any pertaining any to beliefs, pertaining any to religions, pertaining any to schools any of thought. This is what any say al-aqwali, wal-aqaidi, wal-adyani, wal-madhahibi. So always any when we speak any about beliefs, or we speak any about differences any of opinions, always any we go back any to the principle any of whether it corresponds any to the reality or it does not correspond any to the reality, because all this any has linkages. This is what any he said, بِاعْتِبَارِ اشْتِمَالِهَا عَلَى ذَلِكَ وَيُقَابِلُهُ الْبَاطِل. So the opposite any of truth any is baatil. So when something doesn't correspond any to the reality, any it is false. وَأَمَّا الصِّدْقُ, then he goes on any to speak any about sidq, يعني truthfulness. So truthfulness, and basically we find any, for example, in the field any of tasawwuf, we spoke any about, for example, the characteristic any of truthfulness. So it is an attribute any in a person that he always any speak the truth. So he said, وَأَمَّا الصِّدْقُ فَقَدْ شَاعَ اسْتِعْمَالُهُ فِي الْأَقْوَالِ خَاصَةً. So when comes any to as-sidq, what is any the difference any between as-sidq and al-haqq? So we say al-haqq yani is the truth. As-sidq yani is truthfulness. And al-Imam Taftazani yani mentioned that this as-sidq, which we refer yani to truthfulness, usually it is mentioned or it is described in speeches. It is described in speeches. For example, earlier I said that this is a cup. So this is a statement. Yani I say this is a cup. So when you look at my statement, then you analyze whether this statement of mine that I make, does it correspond to the truth of the reality? So once we say it's yes, then we say then this is a true statement, a true statement that speaks about the truth. So there is a difference between the statement that is made and the principle of truth. So if the statement that is made coincide with the principle of truth, then it is the reality and it is the truth. So here Imam Taftazi basically is speaking about the what we call it, the connection between al-haqq and as-sidq. Al-haqq and as-sidq. So one is a principle, another one can be statements or can be actions. So as long as those actions or those statements are within the principle of truth, then it is considered to be the truth. وَأَمَّا الصِّدْقُ فَقَدْ شَاعَ اسْتِعْمَالُهُ فِي الْأَقْوَالِ خَاصَّةً وَيُقَابِلُهُ الْكَذِبِ. So the opposite of sidq is al-kadhib, lying. Opposite of sidq is lying. So if I say for example, this is a pen, this is a pen, my statement is wrong. My statement is not based on sidq, but it is based on kadhib. It is based on kadhib because it does not correspond to the reality. So I hope we can differentiate. We can differentiate between the statement that is being made and the principle or the theory of truth. وَقَدْ يُفَرَّقُ بَيْنَهُمَا بِأَنَّ الْمُطَابَقَةَ تُعْتَبَرُ فِي الْحَقِّ مِنْ جَانِبِ الْوَاقِعِ. So when we speak about the principle of truth, always we speak about the reality. The reality, al-waaqi. What is the reality that is witness. So then we can understand whether a particular thing is true or false. But when it comes to the attribute of truthfulness, وَفِي الصِّدْقِ مِنْ جَانِبِ الْحُكْمِ. So when min janib al-hukmi is for us to establish whether this is something that is true or not. How do we know it is something that is true or not? We go back to the principle or the theory of truth. Does it correspond to the reality or it does not correspond to the reality? فَمَعْنَى صِدْقِ الْحُكْمِ مُطَابَقَتُهُ لِلْوَاقِعِ. So when we want to understand the truthfulness of something that is spoken or something that is done, how do we know? مُطَابَقَتُهُ لِلْوَاقِعِ. Yani when it corresponds to the reality. When it corresponds to the reality. وَمَعْنَى حَقِيقَتِهِ مُطَابَقَةُ الْوَاقِعِ إِيَّهِ. But when we speak any about the reality or the essence any of something, then we go any the opposite side, yani we say mutabaqatul waqi', yani the corresponding yani of the reality in its relation yani to the essence any or the thing any itself. So now yani there are two things here, yani we have any the theory any of the reality or the principles any of the reality, and we have the thing any that is spoken, or the thing any that is spoken, or the thing any that is done. So we say that if the thing any that is spoken, it corresponds any to the reality, then it is considered any to be, any the truth. So but if you put any the other way around, when you speak any about particular reality, then we say that it is any something that corresponds any to the truth. So these are the two differences any between the principle any of reality and truthfulness that leads any to the truth. So I hope any it is clear any inshallah. So this is any basically the commentary any of Imam Taftazani any on the meaning any of al-haqq. So there is something that I would like any to share today. We find any, for example, in the Western any philosophy, where the philosophers they have differences any amongst any themselves on the meaning any of truth, and how any we establish any truth. So as far any as the Islamic any perspective any is it is clear, as what any we mentioned, that truth any is something any that corresponds any to the reality. And how do we know that something any is truth? Any we have any to base any on the principle any of truth, that if it corresponds any to the reality, and we say it is true. If it does not any correspond any to the reality, we say it is false. So I did any some slides before any we continue. For the translation, any for those any who have the PDF, any you can read any translation. So this any basically any what any we mentioned any earlier. And before any we go on, I will go back any to so many of the slides any that I did. So we find any, for example, Imam Nasafi began by speaking any about the correspondence theory of truth. So in philosophy, there is this notion any that they call it correspondence theory of truth. This is basically what Imam Nasafi any is speaking any about. So it is any one of the branches any of the Western any philosophy to establish any the truth or false. The basic idea of the correspondence any theory is that what we believe or say is true if it is corresponds to the way things actually are, to the facts. This is any based any on the definition any of the Westerners. So we find any there is what you call a lot any of similarities any between us and them. طيب. So this is what we covered any earlier. Imam Nasafi any mentioned about qala ahlul haqq. Imam Taftazani any mentioned about the meaning any of al-haqq any as what we have covered. This is any the translation. In metaphysics and philosophy of language, a correspondence of truth states any that the truth or falsity of a statement is determined only by how it relates any to the world and whether it accurately corresponds any with that world. So in philosophy any they use any these terms. They use any these terms relates any to the world. And if you say relates any to the world and relates any to the reality, what is any witness by its essence, and it is a reality and in the outside world. So now this is the thing any that I want to start off and to explain about the issue any of modernism and postmodernism with relation any to the theory of truth. So I believe any as a Muslim it is important any for us any to understand some any of these terminologies, because like it or not any we are influenced in our daily lives by some notions any of modernism or post any modernism. So it is important any for us to at least any have some any basic any understanding about the Western any philosophy, because any the Western any philosophy any dominated any many countries any in the world, and it influenced any the how any people think. So before any we go and speak any about modernism and postmodernism, and the reason any why I want to speak any about modernism and postmodernism, because any the differences in as what we mentioned is pertaining any to the theory of truth. So we find there is a difference between modernists and postmodernists on the establishment any of truth, which inshallah after this any we will get any into that. But before any we get into that, there are some introductions any that has to be explained. So now any when we enter into the Western any philosophy, there are basically the 5 any disciplines, and they call it in the 5 any disciplines any of philosophy. So when you read any Western any philosophy, these are the 5 any disciplines any basically. Number 1, the question is what is real? What is real? And this is metaphysics. What is beyond? What is beyond any physics? What is what you call it? The reality that is beyond what we have witnessed. So this is any a branch any of philosophy. They call it the metaphysics. Number 2 any is about the concept how do we know, the theory any of knowledge. How do we know what we know? How do we know what we know? And this is any a branch any that is called epistemology. Number 3, who am I? And this is any human any nature. Number 4, how should I live? That is the field any of ethics. And number 5, how should we live? That is any in the field of politics and economics. So their philosophy any basically covers any these 5 aspects. So the aspects of metaphysics, the aspect of epistemology, the aspects any of human nature, the aspect of ethics and politics and economy. So when we study any philosophy, these are the 5 any branches, and at least any we should have some any basic any understanding. So now any we go on. So before any we speak about postmodernism, actually this what I want any to speak about more is about postmodernism. But before any we go into postmodernism, it is important any for us any to understand what is modernism, because modernism, after any modernism, and then comes any post any modernism. So we have any to understand about what is any modernism. So modernism and it started in the 17th century with people any like René Descartes and Francis Bacon. These are any some many of the philosophers, or they call it any the Enlightenment any philosophers that is known any to be the people any who are behind the modernism any era, the era any of modernism, and it is in the 17th century. This is any the move away from religious perspectives that ground people's knowledge, because any in the West last time when they speak any about knowledge, always any they link any with Christianity. They link any to the church. So they will go any to the church, and they will go any to the priests, and they regard their religious any figures as people any who are given inspirations any from God. So the people who establish this modernism in philosophy, they believe any that we should not any be doing that. They believe any that we should put any religious inclinations any aside, or religious any beliefs any aside, in order for us any to establish the truth. So again here any it is about any understanding any the truth. So they want to basically anyone to put any aside the religious any perspective. This is different any before the pre-modernism. Pre-modernism any as what I mentioned here. If you wanted to explain something, you explain any with God. Always any they have this connection any with God. Of course here any I'm speaking any about what you call it the West, the people any of the West, the history any of their philosophy. So this was any the Judeo and the Christian worldview prior to the 17th century, because any in the West any basically the religions any what you call it that is dominant any in the West before the 17th century, and it is of course Christianity. And Christianity we have in the Roman and the Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox, and then any there's also Judaism and the Jews. So these are the dominant any religion any that is present any during that time. Descartes and Francis Bacon and some other philosophers felt that something and it was wrong with the Western world. So this is only the beginning. When Descartes and Francis and Bacon, they felt that something and is wrong and with some perspectives and of knowledge and how any people attain any knowledge from the religious any figures. So they felt that something must be done. How are we able to revive this notion of rationalism rather than we depend on spirituality or we depend on religious perspectives, and that's what we mentioned. Something was wrong with the Western world is that they had some assumptions about knowing about our knowledge that were ineffective, so they wanted to start clean. So they say that we are going to build any principles, that by those principles we are able to differentiate what is truth and what is false. They wanted to create any foundation so that they can build our knowledge upon and they can cast aside religious perspective. So this is what you call it, the wave of modernism that sparked in Europe during the time of René, and Descartes. So when we look at the 5 dimensions of philosophy, when we speak about modernism, actually on top there, the word here there is modernism, because you cannot see because I covered anybody video. So when it comes to the modernism in terms of metaphysics, they use any reason. They use any reason to understand things and to understand any realities. And when it comes to understanding any nature, they have this philosophy of naturalism. The philosophy of naturalism is basically the philosophy that believes that nature possesses power, that nature has independent efficacy. Nature has independent efficacy. Last time in Aqidah Sanusiya, we spoke about the people of Taba' and Illah. And even in the Kharidah Bahiyya also, we spoke about Taba' wal Illah. And it is basically the school of thought of naturalism. So the modernists basically they ascribe to naturalism. They ascribe to naturalism because a lot of them they do not believe in the existence of God. They do not believe in the existence of God, but not all of them. Some of them believe in the existence of God. It's just that they say that in order to believe in the existence of God, it has to be explained with reason that is accepted, that is of sound reason, and that can be understood rationally, not something that is illogical. So this is the beginning of the philosophy of modernism with regard to metaphysics. And then when it comes to epistemology, they have this notion that is called objectivism. There is an objective in things, that we are able to understand the things around us. It is we have the ability to understand the truth around us by our experience and by our reason. And about human nature, they believe that human beings have the free will, basically to do whatever things that he believes that it is right, and he has autonomy. So there is no such thing and that he has to ask any permission from the church, or he has to go to the church and to repent and so on and so forth. So they have this autonomy within them. When it comes to ethic, they ascribe to individualism, which what you call it, it is branch of moral philosophy, which they determine what is good and what is bad, and they look at the society that they live in, and they look at the consensus of the people living within that society on how to determine whether a particular action is considered to be evil, or a particular action considered to be good. And then when it comes to politics and economics, they ascribe to capitalism, and it is one we see for example in the age of colonization, where capitalism is highly ascribed to when it comes to gathering of wealth, different from socialism, which come in the post modernism more than in the era of modernism. And then the era of this modernism, and it comes by the Enlightenment. Enlightenment is a period in Western history where there is a renaissance, and there is what you call it, this a time where they come up with a lot of scientific research and scientific methods, and the expansion of science, the industrial revolution, all these things happen in the period of Enlightenment, the period of reason. So this is basically what is within the era of modernism. So it is important to understand some of these notions and so many of these terms in order for us to understand post modernism which is coming. So when it comes to the pre-modernism, just now when we spoke about modernism, pre-modernism is the age before modernism. So basically it's before the 17th century. So when it comes into metaphysics, they ascribe to supernaturalism. They believe, of course, they believe in God. And we have the church fathers, for example, if you read the history of Western philosophy, before the Enlightenment period, we have these church fathers like Clement of Alexandria, who is famous during that time. So the common people, they, when it comes to beliefs in metaphysics, they depend on supernaturalism, meaning believing in a deity, believing in a divine entity, and believing in what you call it, in basically in religious beliefs. So this is pre-modernism. So that is why post-modernists and modernists they regard people who ascribe to religion, or people who believe in God, they are backward. Backward in a sense, they are pre-modern. They are still in the Middle Ages, because pre-modernism is basically in the medieval period, in the Middle Ages. So you will find for example, modernists nowadays, and even and especially postmodernists, they regard religious people as backward, as people who are still in the era of the Middle Ages, and people who are not progressive now, because they define what is progressive, which we will come after this, inshallah. And then in the field of epistemology, believe in mysticism, believe in things of the unseen, of the faith that they have, just like in Islam, for example, they mention the same thing, we believe in angels, we believe in the jinn, we believe in the unseen. It's part of our faith. So they regard this as mysticism. When it comes into epistemology, that we do not have sound reasoning towards the belief that we had. And then when it comes into human nature, of course, what you see here, basically this is the framework of Christianity, which they believe that human beings originally are in sin, and everything is subject to God's will. Whereas the modernists they do not believe in this, because they believe the power of us, the power of human beings. So they are not in need of God. They are not in need to repent, because everything is within their choice. So this is the difference. Later on, you will see, I put it side by side. When it comes into the ethics, they believe in collectivism, as a community. And when it comes into politics, of course, in Lasan feudalism, they are in tribes and monarchs that were dominant in Europe. And when and where the time of pre-modernism is in the medieval era. So this is the comparison between pre-modernism and modernism. So in terms of metaphysics, the pre-modernists believe in supernaturalism. The modernists believe in reason and naturalism. When it comes to epistemology, they believe in mysticism. Modernism believe in objectivism, experience and reason, human nature, people believe in original sin is subject to God's will. Whereas modernism believe in autonomy of human beings, and the free will of people. And when it comes into ethics, pre-modernism is collectivism. Modernism is in the individualism. And politics and economics feudalism. And modernism they ascribe to liberal capitalism. So this is the difference between the pre-modernism and modernism. Now we will look at post-modernism. Post-modernism. So meaning post-modernism, basically it is after modernism, after the era of modernism, that is after the 20th century. So post-modernism begin in the beginning of the 20th century, and until today it is prevalent in the Western world. This is what is termed as post-modernism, and the era that come after modernism. So when it comes to metaphysics, the post-modernists, they ascribe to this philosophy that is called anti-realism. What is the meaning of anti-realism? Meaning this is the topic of what we are discussing, because Aqaid Nasafi speaks about the truth and the meaning of the truth, and we mentioned that the truth is something that corresponds to the reality. If you speak to the modernists, they will agree with us, and then when you speak about the truth, it is something that corresponds to the reality. But the post-modernists, they reject pre-modernism, and also they reject modernism. They are saying there are no reality of truth out there. There is no reality of the truth. Basically they are saying I do not know the truth, you do not know the truth. So it is something that cannot be established. This is the philosophy of anti-realism. The philosophy of anti-realism, basically they are rejecting the concept of how we establish the truth. So here there is a clash between modernism and post-modernism. When it comes into epistemology, they are subjective to things. So they are not objective. They are not objective. Objective meaning, when we are able to establish the truth, then we have to accept that is the truth. But the post-modernist says that everything is subjective. We do not know. We do not know whether it is what you call it. It is the truth or not the truth, because there is a possibility it is a truth. There is also any possibility that it is not the truth. So for example, if you go back to the example earlier that we mentioned, that we say, for example, if I say the statement that this is a cup, so we say this is the truth, correct? Not because it corresponds to the reality. The modernists will say the same thing, it corresponds to the reality. But the post-modernists, they reject this idea that you have something that can establish as the truth. So this is what basically they reject. So they say that life is meaningless. Later on, inshallah, if there is time, I can quote some of the words of the postmodernists in this era. So they use words like meaningless, life is meaningless, and there is no reality of truth out there. The fact that we do not know, they ascribe to skepticism and subjectivism. To you, it might be the truth, but to me, it is not the truth. So the truth is defined by individuals. It is subjective, and it is not something that is objective. This is the philosophy of postmodernists. Human nature, they believe in determinism, reductionism. In ethics, they believe in collectivism, and in politics and economics is socialism. So different from the modernism, it's more about capitalism. But postmodernists, they speak a lot about socialism. So these are some of the differences. So next, I put all three, so that you can see the difference. So if you look at metaphysics, and this is in Aqidah, this is basically what we are interested in actually. Pre-modernism ascribe to supernaturalism. Modernism is what you call it, ascribe to reason and naturalism, whereas postmodernism ascribe to anti-realism. So these are the rejectors of the theories of the truth. And we are in the era of postmodernism. So that is why as Muslims it is important for us to understand what is behind this philosophy of or this thing that is called postmodernism. So if you see in metaphysics, they ascribe to anti-legalism. So we need to understand what is the thing that make them reject the theory of the truth, because they say that everything is subjective. And likewise in epistemology, they do not ascribe to the correspondence theory of the truth, as what we mentioned. So in reality, in the Islamic perspective, we say it is worse than modernism. So modernism is to be away from the religious perspectives, whereas postmodernism reject both, reject any reason, reject also religion, and what they call it as supernaturalism. So this is the era that we are influenced a lot in the society that we are living, whether we are living in the West or we are living in the East. طيب. Down here I did like a mind map of the enlightenment and vision, and one of the reasons why the philosophers or scholars of the enlightenment era, they believe that by moving away from supernaturalism or religious perspectives, and we hold on to rationality and reason, we will attain what they call it as the progressive or the pursuit of happiness. So if you look at this graph, it all started with reason, because they believe that we have to put all our inclinations and all differences of our languages or differences of our cultures, or we have to put our religious beliefs aside, and we have to bring forth this reasoning and rationalism, that we have to look at things rationally. So because of this, they apply for example in the what you call it in the individual and itself, they have this in the what you call it philosophy of individualism, where it is about liberalism, where people what you call it is free of all free of all what you call it religious authorities or beliefs that are not based on reason. And we have the notion of liberalism that brings to freedom. And in order for you to attain any freedom, you have to be free from all what you call it from all religious dogma. And when it comes to wealth, in order to be wealthy, and you have to ascribe to capitalism, in order to gain wealth. And then in science, and of course they what you call it work on the field of engineering, and in medicine, and by engineering, they believe of course the understanding of attaining material goods, and medicine the importance of health. So once you have freedom, you have wealth from capitalism, you have material goods, and you have health, then you are progressive. So in order for you to be progressive, you have to take the steps. So this is basically what is the enlightenment and vision, which basically the modernists they are propagating this, and they believe that this is the way forward. This is the way forward for human beings to attain progressiveness, or to attain happiness in this world. But when you look in history, after the coming to the 20th century, you find, for example, there are a lot of wars that broke out, a lot of genocides that broke out. So it becomes a big question mark for modernists, that people are asking if this structure brings about progressiveness, then how come there are so many wars that broke out in the 20th century? And we have the First World War I, we have the Second World War. Many people are killed. The world is in chaos, and there is the Great Depression. So there are a lot of skepticism pertaining to this theory of reason. But at the same time, also people are saying that the advance in engineering, yes, and there is any advancement in engineering, there is any an advancement in medicine. So not all any of these things bring about progressiveness, because some of them bring about damage and all these wars and everything that we mentioned earlier. So that is why there is a shift of modernism to post modernism. So postmodernists are saying that this theory cannot be all true. So we need to change some of these things, and we have to relook into our philosophy. So they begin to reject many of the ideas of modernism and the ideas of pre-modernism. So they are saying both of them are wrong. So now we are coming up with a new theory. So this is what we mentioned earlier. They even reject any reason. They say that even if you are able to perform any reason on certain things, and you are able to establish any truths, they say that is subjective. Even the truth is subjective. It can be false. It is not something that is necessary. So they begin to be in doubt in everything. And this is one of the schools of Sufista'iyah. This is also mentioned by al-Imam Nasafi after this, in the text of al-Imam Nasafi. Then inshallah we will go into it. And again, inshallah, in these few lessons, I will speak about some of the notions of post-modernism, and how it is related to Sufista'iyah, to the rejectors of reality, or the rejectors of truth. Let's see. There are certain things that I uploaded actually, but it is not here. Inshallah, because of time, inshallah, we have come to the end of this lesson. In the next lesson, inshallah, I will speak more about this, and inshallah, I will explain what happened in the last stages of the era of modernism, and how it paves the way for postmodernism. So before I stop the lesson for today, again I would like to say that the reason why I speak about modernism and postmodernism, because of the relation of the theory of truth. The difference between modernism and post-modernism is what you see in the graph here. In terms of metaphysics, in understanding reality, the difference is that modernism ascribe to reason, whereas postmodernists it's anti-realism. They do not ascribe to the truth, the ultimate truth that you can obtain from reason. So they are always speaking about subjectivity, even towards reason. So they reject any theories of truth that are established by the modernists. So you have you find even today, for example, there are debates between modernists and postmodernists on so many of these issues. So when we read the aqaid of Nasafiyah, when we understand the definition of truth, then we can understand basically what are the problems that they are facing today, and how are we able to explain Islam to our community, who are indirectly we say influenced by so many of these ideas. So there are some of us for example, we are speaking about modernism, but modernism is an era that passed many years ago. Now a lot of people are more into speaking about postmodernism. But of course it is important to know about the philosophy of modernism, and how it affected the Muslims, whether in the West or the place that we are living in. But post-modernism is what you call it, is a greater threat than modernism. And the issue of transgenderism, of LGBT, it is a branch of postmodernism, because they come when they reject the theory of truth, they start to reject for example, they say that I might be a man in my body, but I feel that I'm a woman. They say this kind of things. I may be a man, but I feel that I'm a woman. So what is the truth here? He is trying to establish that the truth is I'm a woman, even though the reality is I am a man. So they go against the reality. They go against the truth, because truth itself is defined by themselves. So now we have people who define their own truths. This is the problem. So you see a person and you say this is a male. This is a male, but to him he defined himself as a woman. And this is the things that is happening. So if you argue with him, for example, and if you say that you are a male, he said to you I am a male, but to me I am a female. So the truth is subjective. The truth is subjective. So this is one of the example of anti-realism. They do not ascribe to the theory of truth, and this is what we are speaking in the beginning of haqeeqat and Nasafi. So even the modernists are not agreeable with the post modernism. So inshallah, because of time, we will stop here and we'll continue next week. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.